survey, our lunch and learn, our lunch and learn data sharing opportunity. This is the second one that we've done. So we're going to be looking at student completion data, some retention matrix data, as well as a survey that we did to look at student affective outcomes. So Karen, do you want to get us started?
Sure. First off, thank yous to Andrea and Joshua for all of the work on the in the backyard of this this project, because it's a lot of stuff that's had to happen, and there's folks on the call also who are going to deserve some thanks, as well as others who were not here. Joshua, you want to go ahead? Yeah, and so as Andrea said, we're going to look at a retention and completion matrix and a learning survey. Okay. All right. So the retention and completion matrix that was a project that it coalesced in the meetings of the data working group that sprang from Retention Council, and that smaller group included me and Brandy Surveys to service to convene, and then the rest of the folks: Melissa, Christy, Alicia, Jamie, Heather, Julie, Joshua, Stephen, Reggie's, Nancy. So we had lots of conversations about the systems where we have data, and then the actual data that we have. And of course, as y'all know, this is all going to be much more convenient and I'm sure flawless and easy as soon as we have the new ERP. But the aim was to get from those systems and data toward visualization. And you can pop it again and then again. That's not the fancy. I added some fancy animations that probably are just not going to be that important. And so Joshua, you can go ahead and forward through. Yeah, see, that's supposed to represent trends. And then the blue is equity and accessibility, and the red is structural barriers. Okay, so this data working group, the cool thing about it was that we had representation from financial aid and advising, and from career services, enrollment, retention people, the registrar's office, institutional effectiveness, faculty, data governance. The cabinet has contributed quite a bit, and we had folks from all locations and U-wide. So we were we had a lot of conversations, and they were really helpful, because what we were identifying what it was we wanted to find out, what our research questions were, and we were discussing some of the limitations on access to data. So we knew that we wanted to be able to look at trends and identify structural barriers and keep an eye on equity and accessibility. So these are all priorities that data can really help us with. We also wanted to be able to drill down to individuals, relationships, stressors, engagement, and learning experiences. So we really would have a whole person point of view. So we knew we had some particular fields that we wanted represented in the data that we gather. Okay, we can go ahead. Okay, so the goals from that group, as we discussed them, were to make sure that we had valid data and a rigorous vetting process, that we came up with legible and actionable reports, and that we could represent the university as a whole, and then that we could represent each location specifically, because of course location level data is important if you want anything to be actionable. And then we also defined several subpopulations that we were interested in. So this process of figuring out the data, where it was, and how to make it work was really complicated. Brandy and Joshua were the brains behind all of that. Joshua, did you want to say anything about the complexities or the puzzles that you guys had to work out?
There are quite a bit of complexities. Most of the data that we're trying to make sure, and when we vet it, is compare it to our governing bodies, such as like IPEDs. If it has the similar dates, or if we report it to IPEDs, we want to make sure that we're comparing and making sure that that data seems to be relevant to that as one of our biggest vetting processes, but also some of the reporting cues and looking at parameters and working with other offices too. So if anything seems off, we reach out to them to see if anything at all seems off, so we can maybe adjust our parameters or compare to others' data to make it to vet through it.
That's great. Thank you. You can go ahead to the next slide. We may go back to that conversation, Joshua, because some of the issues were and remain a little bit hairy. So the new reporting format is going to look something like this. This is a slide that you're not meant to be able to read because it's just got too many numbers on it. But if Joshua hit the button again. Okay, so this span is for retention rates. And then as we go across, you'll see the first year rates, and you can click again, then the second year, third year, fourth year, and you'll see the graduation rates at the end, and they are set up in 4, 6, and 10-year rates. And then the information at the bottom is meant to look at trends at 5 years and 10 years. So the tabs at the bottom, those are going to take you from the university-wide tab across to each of the locations. Now you'll see there's not a location yet for the adult campuses and online. And the reason for that is, or the reasons, are some of those complications that Joshua was talking about. So Joshua, you want to talk about a little bit about the parameters issue that is going to slow us down just a little bit with the adult sites?
Yeah, the adult sites have different parameters because students they can enroll, say, for summer, and then they might be off during fall, or they may, I think it's based off of their enrollments because the time changes, and also our calendars are different too.
Yeah.
But I don't want to say the terms wrong, not where the parameters that we're looking at is doing a semester basis, so that way we can easier track the retention rates, persistent / retention rates off of that by semester to semester basis.
Yeah, so when we define cohorts in the adult sites, because almost everybody, like 99.9% are transfer students. Now, as we work out that model for transfer students at the adult sites, that model is going to be very useful for the residential sites as well. So eventually it's going to also pan out as a way for us to keep an eye on how things go for transfer students. Okay, go ahead to next. So here's some highlights. This is a sort of close-up of a section of the OUKS page. And if you'll click once more, the most important numbers are these. These are the third term retention rates. And the third term is the fall to fall retention. So this is where traditionally institutions have had struggles keeping students at the same institution from their first year to their second year if they enter as first year students. So what you'll see is that at the college, we've had fairly consistent rates most of the time, around 60–65%. And we've had a few years that were unusually good, especially early on. I would argue that 2013 and 2012, probably maybe even 2014, that we had probably a lower student to advisor ratio. We also had definitely a lower student to faculty ratio. So, but we look like we stabilize in general across the decade around 65%. Okay, next. There's OUAZ, and then focusing on those third term retention rates, you'll see that those are increasing overall. I mean, if you made a trend line, maybe last year was a hiccup compared to the year before, but that's looking pretty good. And in fact, the trend is placing OUAZ close to where the campus in Kansas has been over the last decade. So the early low retention is totally expected when you have a brand new campus. It's very difficult to do that work of establishing a culture and stabilizing the students' sense of home. So these numbers are actually looking really good to me. So continue, next one. Here's comparison. So you can look at them side by side. So there's next little click. That's where I'm seeing in the fourth year, OUAZ and OUKS are looking fairly parallel to each other. Okay, and one more. And then you can see actually that in these last 2 years, both campuses have trended down from the previous year. So not sure what that is. It could be 1,000 different things. And we'd have to do some analysis and correlation with other factors. Is it pandemic? Did pandemic give us a false boost in the previous year? Not sure, but it'll require more thinking across the community for us to really fully understand. Because the meaning of data like these, that is extremely contextual. So I'm hoping we'll have lots of conversations to follow up. Okay, you can go to the next. Okay, so in the future, what we are doing at the moment, we're getting additional vetting of the matrix by the chancellor and the cabinet. We're looking at format and accuracy. We have some bugs to work out. It's not easy to have a multi-page Excel chart with graphs, and I mean, it's just a lot. It's a lot of moving parts and a lot of formulas and things that if the links are not carefully, I mean, you just have to fine tooth comb every cell to make sure it works. So we're vetting that. We've got some excellent suggestions for making that data more precise and better visualized. We'll be posting the finalized version of that retention matrix in My Ottawa at the page for institutional effectiveness. And then the next step is going to be for us to do some expanding into Pell eligible and first generation students. Now, first gen, that's a tough one because we don't have a consistent entry of information in that field, and the getting it from the FAFSA, the financial aid form, into the system is a little glitchy, and this is an example of something that the new ERP is going to fix, by golly. I mean, I'm just going to say it is, because this is a data point that there is no institution that doesn't want to know about this. And if J1 hasn't got a easy peasy solution on that, then I'm going to poke them in the nose. You want to hit the button again? There we go. Okay, so for these other areas, race and ethnicity, provisionally admitted students, sports and activities, the major that students had when they exit, scholarship amounts, and their state of origin. We do have a report. It covers the years 2018 to 2020. It is a little rough drafty, but it does have some very interesting information. You want to click one more time? Yeah. Okay. So this is the cool thing. So we've been talking with folks in Arizona about the Success Academy. So and push the button one more time. This is a table from that booklet, and one more time. Excellent. Okay. So I had to do these numbers by hand. So math's not my gig, but I'm pretty sure these are good. So in Kansas, just thinking about provisionally admitted students, we had 201 students in the entire first year cohort, and of those, 26 were admitted provisionally. That's about 10% of the whole first year population. And in that provisional group, 10 of them returned. So their retention rate for that subgroup was 38%. And magically, in 2018, it was the same, 38%. In Arizona, the first year cohort for 2020 was 252. And of those, 64 students were admitted provisionally, or 25.4% of the total cohort. And then of that provisional group, 34 of them returned. Their retention rate was 53%. Darn good, really good, on par with the average student. Their 2018 provisional retention rate was 26%. Y'all need to look at that twice, maybe. That's incredible. I mean, I know these are very small sample sizes, but my goodness. So this tells me something really amazing about, I think, this is my theory, about the Success Academy, because this Success Academy started up in, did we say 2019? Yeah. So they just had time to do this. That's amazing, right? I think so. So yeah, it's just a really this is so folks in Arizona didn't have of course, look to the future. They did know that they were having retention problems. They used that information about the retention among their the provisional students. They used that to make the decision to invest some resources in the Success Academy. This is a really big deal for HLC because it's excellent documentation that that we are looking at data. Even if you guys didn't get the data from us, so much the better, right? Yeah, I'm watching the chat too. So Dr. Marsh mentions the role of Adawe mentors with first year students. Yes, and the Adawe model has been a lot of different things. At the Kansas campus, it was for a long time, well, for the first, 5 years or so, it was, and if you hear something in the background that sounds like a gasping zombie, it's my sister's dog, and the door is shut and she's just loud. Anyway, so the Adawe mentors used to have a caseload maximum of 80 to 100 students, and that model wasn't sustainable in terms of finances, but the retention rates were really high when we had that model. They may have gotten compromised some with very large numbers of students per mentor, but the presence of full-time faculty has also been a factor. There's a few things, trend lines, that we could probably match up with retention rates or attrition rates. Absolutely. For the provisional groups, Tamira is asking, do you have other demographic information? So we haven't done that yet. But I understand from Chet that there are a few things that you guys are watching with provisional groups, like, that there's a little bit better retention for the athletes who are provisionally admitted than there is for the non-athletes. Yeah. So yeah, we also have the typical correlations historically with first-gen students having extra trouble staying in school, and students who are Pell eligible do have extra challenges, and the weight of those kinds of challenges is going to fluctuate depending on the economy and other factors. So yeah, yep, that's all good. Anything else? Let's see. I think Joshua, you can hit the thing again. Okay, so we're on to the next section of, but did anybody have questions that I can try to answer about the retention matrix? Okay, so Andrea?
Or there'll be more questions as they have a chance to look at it. So, so what I am going to talk about is an assessment that the IE office did. So as you all know, or may or may not know, each of our programs has program learning outcomes as well as effective outcomes. So I probably should have posted those or put those on the slide. Instead, I'm going to post them in the chat. So what we wanted to look at, we wanted to go ahead and assess is the effective outcomes, which are outcomes 5 and 6 for the undergraduate programs. And we wanted to reach out and get student perceptions on how they feel that they were meeting these outcomes for our undergraduate students that were nearing graduation. And so working with the registrar's office, we were able to get the email addresses for all of these students, and we developed a 21-question survey. And since we kind of had the attention of the students, we wanted to also start looking at collecting a little bit of co-curricular data, just to help us understand as we begin assessing co-curricular programs, just kind of an idea of where to start. So we, again, assessed the effective learning outcomes, which I did post those in the chat, and some co-curricular participation for students across all campuses. We ended up with 161 responses, which wasn't bad. I think it was about a 30, almost 40% response rate. It does help when you offer the students incentives of gift cards. So that really helped increase participation. We had 128 female responses and 33 male responses. And you can see here online had a high representation of responses, as well as the campuses did pretty good. They were pretty even as far as responses went. And I am posting the top majors that were represented in the survey. So nursing was highly represented, elementary education, exercise science, and healthcare management both had 14 students respond for each major, and biology and business administration had 13 students for each major. I felt like I was going to say something else on this one. Oh, so before I start, I do want to let you all know that I have created a booklet that shows the data across each of the campuses and provides some sort of data visualization, and that will be posted in the IE area on the portal as well. It's not there, unfortunately. I wanted to have that there for you guys today, but I will make sure that that booklet gets posted there so you all can review the data in more depth, because I'm just going to pull out some highlights today and talk about those. The other thing I do want to say is, because we are assessing effective outcomes, and this is very important for faculty who are looking at their action plans for their programs and looking at redeveloping programs, we will make sure that this is sent out to faculty as well as the school deans. The data is disaggregated by major. It's disaggregated by the demographic data. It's also disaggregated by the campuses. So you guys will have the opportunity to really look at where the students are responding per major, per campus, and the demographics. Unfortunately, I wish we could have had a higher response rate, but this is kind of the first time that we did that. So again, we'll start looking at getting these effective outcomes assessed on a more frequent basis. So you can go ahead and go to the next slide, Josh. So I want to talk about some highlights. So these are U-wide highlights. So as we look at this, consider these across all the campuses. And these are just some of the highlights from the data that I pulled out. So for the assessment, so looking at the affective outcomes 5 and 6, 91% of the students would agree or strongly agree that their major adds value to the global community. So again, this is their perception of understanding how their major is adding value to the needs of the global community. 76% of the students agree or strongly agree that their education prepared them for working in the global community. And then 98%, which is a pretty high number, 98% of students strongly agree and continued learning within their field of study. And then 77% of the students agree that their education at Ottawa University prepared them to work in their field. So that's pretty important data. There was a couple of challenges that I pulled out on the assessment, a little bit lower on the first one, only 22% of students, but 22% did disagree or strongly disagree that their major is adding value to the local community. And the majority of these were female students. However, the majority of the students that completed the survey were female students, though this had a higher representation of female students than the general overall other areas that we collected the data. So I thought that was important to showcase. The second one is interesting. So 98% of our students agree with the importance of continued learning in their field of study. However, half of them are neutral, disagree, or strongly disagree about obtaining a master's or doctoral degree from OU. So just a theory of kind of what that tells me is we have a lot of students out there who agree that they need to continue learning in their field of study. However, maybe we aren't offering the right opportunities, certificates, programs, areas to continue and further learning for these students. So that is something that we could really dive into further, particularly as we continue and look at the idea of certificates. But it looks like we have a lot of students who agree that continued learning is important. However, over half of them say they wouldn't come back to Ottawa as far as a master's or doctoral degree. So potentially there's some opportunities there in meeting the needs of those students. So next slide, Josh. So the other thing, again, that we looked at was co-curricular. And it was interesting to look at the co-curricular, particularly since we had such a high number of online students that completed this survey. And I think it's difficult for our online students to comprehend co-curricular, which is learning outside of the classroom in an online modality. However, when I get to the end, there's some interesting comments that really show learning outside of the classroom happening within the workplace. Versus co-curricular students on the campuses who are RAs or have leadership position athletics. So again, these are some highlights and insights that are UI. So the top 3 areas that students said that they learned and changed the most outside of the classroom were interactions with faculty. Sorry, that slide got messed up. Interactions with faculty, consulting with the advisors, and athletic participation, which makes sense, particularly since we have such high athletic participation. However, what's interesting for our office is in considering athletics as co-curricular learning opportunities. And so I think what we're realizing is that there's a lot of opportunities to really engage students in co-curricular learning, leadership, communication that's happening within the athletics, which is, pretty high in amount of athletes on each of the campuses. So what did students learn during their co-curricular involvement? The top 3 areas were time management, communication skills, and leadership. So some of the challenges that we had were that 120 of the students who participated in the survey stated they did not participate in any leadership roles. So that is an opportunity maybe for campuses to engage students further in particular leadership positions, or maybe even just talk about them more. But again, that's something that we can look at further as we get further into assessing our co-curricular programs. So next slide, Josh. So what I did now is I kind of broke down highlights and insights per campus. And so I did the 3 campuses. I did the campus in Ottawa, the campus in Surprise, and we looked at online. I will add that there are some data coming from Overland Park as well as Wisconsin. However, for this presentation today, I just did online OU Kansas and OU AZ, but the booklet will have more and the raw data will have more disaggregated by particular site. So 45 students from the Ottawa, Kansas campus responded to the survey, and the top majors represented for your campus in Ottawa was exercise science and biology. Some of the major strengths that were pulled out is that students that completed the survey, their perception at the Ottawa campus is that they feel that their major adds value. The majority of them feel their major adds value to both the local and global community. So one of the challenges in the beginning was the local community and meeting and understanding those needs. However, that's a strength in the Ottawa, Kansas campus, so that's great. And again, the majority of students at the Ottawa campus found value in continued learning within their field of study. Students learned and changed the most outside of the classroom. What they reported was athletics, interactions with faculty, advisors, and campus jobs. Through co-curricular involvement, students rated leadership and communication skills on that campus as what they learned or accomplished the most. Those were the top two. So one of the challenges were that 29% of the students were either neutral, disagree, or strongly disagree that their education prepared them to work in their field of study. So that might be something to consider or look at when you review the disaggregated data. It's understanding the demographics of who those students were that felt that way, maybe programs. So that could be addressed within the curriculum. Next slide. Looking at the online campus, again, high number of representation for this survey. So 68 students. Top majors were nursing and healthcare management. So strengths, the majority of the students feel their major prepared them to work in their field of study. That makes me feel great about nursing particularly. I'm glad our nurses feel prepared, so great job. The majority of the students value continued learning in their field. Again, two high industries to really value continued learning, nursing and healthcare. Interestingly enough, thinking about co-curricular involvement in the online campus, so students felt that they learned and changed the most outside of the classroom through consulting with academic advisors, interacting with faculty, and career services. So our online adult students felt that their involvement, their co-curricular involvement, that supported them in increasing their time management and communication skills. So one of the challenges were that 34% of this student group were either neutral or strongly disagreed in understanding how their major adds value to the needs of the local community. So the local community, which is in the area of which they're living. So next slide would be our final campus, which is the Surprise OUAZ campus. 42% completed the survey with strong Latinx representation, which I think is indicative of the demographics on that campus. Top majors were exercise science and business administration. So the strengths for that campus that were highlighted in the data, the majority of the students there feel that their major adds value to both the local and global community. The students feel very prepared to work within a global community. Students learned and changed the most through, I went ahead and put 4 because I thought you guys would like to see Spirit Life events. Athletics, interactions with faculty, advisors, and those Spirit Life events. So through co-curricular involvement, like online, students rated time management and communication skills as where they feel they learned and changed or what they acquired the most. One of the challenges, so we had 28 students who, on a whole, across all campuses, who were neutral or disagreed about understanding the value of lifelong learning. And of those 28 students UI, 43% of them were OUAZ students. So I pulled that out as an opportunity for that campus to maybe really consider what that data means as far as understanding the value of lifelong learning, since that is a pretty big part of who we are as an institution. So you can go up to the next slide. So the other thing that we did gather were some qualitative comments from the students. And again, this data will all be available, but I did want to pull out some interesting ones, some good ones that I thought you all would like to see. So we asked 3 areas that students could write comments and additional ways that students plan to apply their major to meeting the needs of the local and global community, additional ways students plan to further knowledge and growth in their field of study, and additional insights about co-curricular learning. I won't read all of these, I'll just grab one from each. So meeting the needs of local and global community. I am bilingual, so I hope to use my degree to help improve the health outcomes of the Spanish-speaking population. Additional ways students plan to further and grow their knowledge in the field. Lots of internship discussion, lots of students stating internships here, which is great. And then additional insights about co-curricular learning. There was a lot of discussion in the comments about, diversity, working with students of different culture groups, a lot of leadership discussion in the qualitative comments. So I think you guys will find those very interesting when you go through those. I do want to say next steps for our office, and Josh, you can just leave this up, let people read that. But next steps for our office right now are to really work with a group to consider first what our co-curricular, just start defining our co-curricular programs across each of the campuses. And then we will work to support those groups in beginning assessment for some of those co-curricular programs and really creating a calendar of how we'll assess those. We can't bite off all of those at once, but we do need to start looking at that and what that means for the institution, the co-curricular involvement for the students, and how we can increase areas of getting students involved in these programs and potentially increasing the learning of the co-curricular programs, because there's a lot of learning and growth that happens, and you'll see that in some of the comments. There's a lot of learning and growth that happens for students outside of the classroom. And so we have a lot of opportunity to really assess those programs and understand where we can further support students. So this survey was twofold in supporting the faculty and understanding the affective outcomes. And I would say on a whole, we're doing great. Students really are valuing the global engagement that they're getting in the classroom across all campuses. They're really understanding how they're learning, how they're saying, I have met the needs of learning what I need to from Ottawa and for my field. I think there's a couple of opportunities, but I was really impressed with the results that we got for the effective outcomes. And I think we're doing a great job on all of the majors that were represented. So hopefully we'll get higher representation next time we do this and maybe expand our survey. Again, it was only 21 questions. So I think we've got some opportunity to expand and maybe rearrange some of those questions. But it was a good start to assessing the effective outcomes and beginning looking at co-curricular involvement of our students. So I will stop there. Josh, you could probably stop the presentation and just ask what questions we might have. You guys are a quiet group.
You're giving us numbers and statistics that is something that for we HR guys, we have to ponder for great periods of time.
Yeah, that's okay. I understand. And you guys aren't looking at the data either. So that's okay. So we will make sure that data gets posted on the IE website, because one of our goals is to create transparency for you all with the data. So not only do we want to share the data, but we want you guys to have that in your hands. So we will make sure that the recording is available on the IE website. The previous Lunch and Learn that we did is out there. I'll actually put that link in here real quick. So here is the link to the previous Lunch and Learn that we did on the NESE and RNL data. And we will make sure this is out there and that the data is living on the institutional effectiveness site so that you guys can access it and look at it. Again, the learning survey data for the faculty and deans that will be coming out disaggregated to you all, so you have a chance to really dive into that if you had any programs that were represented in there. So in the IE office, Karen, we're always open to suggestions and changes. We do try to take consideration in, and we make sure that we get big groups reviewing surveys before we send them out. Of course, the IRB approval. So,
Andrea, this is Brian. First of all, outstanding job. This is great to have this data. So the entire IE team, really, really kudos to you guys. So congratulations. It's exactly what we need to drive decision making is data. Do you have? Is there, and you may not be able to answer this particular question, but do we have benchmark institutions that we're looking at in terms of the data comparison?
That would be more for like retention data, I'm guessing, Brian.
Yeah, first year rates, like what should we be striving for? What, how does it compare to other benchmark? And what are the benchmark institutions that we're looking at?
That's a good question. I'll let the retention committee folk answer that one if they have looked at that. Karen or Josh?
Well, and others on the retention committee may have looked at other things too, but I know that we do take a look at the context of other institutions, and it's a little tricky because the retention rates for private nonprofit four-year schools are really high, way higher than ours, unless you drill down to those that have the kind of admissions practices that we have, that have provisionally admitted students, that have a higher rate of first gen and low income students, because in those areas we're not like most four-year privates. So we have to find the right group. So we'd like to attain toward higher rates. We're not out of the norms for the kinds of challenges that we face and that our students face. But one thing that's really interesting internally is that we can benchmark a little bit between the two residential campuses, though it's dangerous to do that. You know, the devil can quote scripture, and you should see what the devil can do with data. But I think it is useful to look at retention, for example, with the comparing the provisional students' results prior to an intervention and then after an intervention. And then very conveniently, we have a control group that didn't have a change in interventions between those time frames. At the of course, it's a best practice, right, to have an intervention specifically targeting provisional students. So seeing what had been done at Surprise, Ottawa campus wanted to do provide some interventions for provisional students. So this fall, they're implementing a lab, a 4-credit, I think it's 1, maybe 2 credit hours, a lab that's a study session alongside co-enrolled with the writing program. And the plan was to do that also with the math course. So I'm not sure about, I definitely saw the writing lab in the rotation. But once that intervention's in place, then we'll have baseline data to compare to what happens after we try that intervention out. So, yeah.
That is very important. I think we do want to go forward with that. The data makes me, this is George, makes me wonder whether also we could think about the following, whether if we got into our own internal reverse credentialing, that would help us in terms of rates and putting our foot forward, that incentivizing students to stay on. For example, if we had our own associate's degree, then we could provide graduation rates that would be strong for students that would actually get a diploma leaving us prior maybe to 4 years. And also for persistent students who are wavering and not thinking about maybe coming back for their second year, if they had an idea that, well, if you just stay on for a second year, you'll get a credential that might help them, those that, you know, are a little bit turned off by their experience and not being able to play in the sports, perhaps, or making the first team and the like. So the reverse credentialing, which is being introduced, I think, and has been thought about in public institutions, might be something for us to think about, again, because we are mirroring to a great extent some of the populations that publics have.
Yeah, I think that's a great thought. It's also true that we have a lot of students who choose OU over local community colleges because of their engagement in athletics. So we're going to have share a lot with the community college population, very highly likely. In the past, we've had kind of a gentleman's agreement with the community colleges in the region that we don't offer an associate's degree. So that the politics of that would have to get be part of the conversation.
I agree with that, but the majority of states in America now have provided by legislation that their state community colleges can enter into the 4-year market.
Yes. So that's right. Excellent.
Any other thoughts or questions? I really appreciate such a large group right before the 4th of July weekend. So thank you all for taking the time to come out and listen to some data today. All right. Dr. Marsh, did you have a question? Oh, go for it.
Yes,
I think you're frozen.
Oh, no.
I know. That always happens, right? When you're getting ready to ask the question. I think you're
I'll
unfrozen.
pass.
Okay. You can email us anytime, Dr. Marsh. Just send us an email. We'd be happy to answer your questions. So, all right. Well, thank you all. I posted the survey in the chat. It's also in the IE website. We appreciate your responses. Helps keep us on track. So thank you, everybody, and happy 4th of July weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you.